Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Today we're speaking with Mel all about the role of pelvic physiotherapy in those first few weeks postpartum. A lot of people think that you don't need to see a pelvic physio until 6 to 8 weeks postpartum, but that in fact is not the case. They have a huge role to play in both preparing for the birth experience and also preparing for those first few weeks postpartum, and they can help you out with all kinds of symptoms you wouldn't necessarily think about, and it can be done virtually. No need for a pelvic exam if you don't want or don't feel comfortable doing that. So check out our episode right after this quick reminder.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are doctors Sarah and Alicia, maternity physicians and moms who have been through it all. We want to empower you with knowledge so you can have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience you can.
She Found Health and She Found Motherhood is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This information does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Health and She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any of the institutions with which we are affiliated. Some of our podcast episodes are sponsored so that we can keep getting great info out there to you, our listeners. We only partner with companies that we truly believe in. Some of our links and suggestions may be affiliates, and we would appreciate you using them to help fund this important work. Now let's get to it. Mel, I always love chatting with you on podcasts. You're one of my favorite guests. And today we're going to talk about something that we often don't talk about. We talk about a huge amount in terms of preparation for kind of childbirth and that postpartum period especially, but coming from a pelvic physiotherapist point of view, I think a lot of us think about having that 6-week check and then doing your pelvic physio afterwards and it being in person and potentially invasive, and people are scared and don't know what to expect. I had a patient come in last week actually who was, do I have prolapse? And I directed her to the podcast that you did way back when around childbirth as a musculoskeletal injury and all that type of stuff. And we talked about breath work. So I know you're very passionate about this, and there's a ton of information that people can get to prepare for that early postpartum period. But today we're going to talk a little bit about that and the role of a pelvic physio in that first 6 weeks postpartum. So let's not wait till that 6 to 8 week mark. How can pelvic physio support you there? So Mel, why don't you give a little intro on who you are and what's brought you to this point, and then we'll dive in.
Awesome. First of all, I feel honored that you say I'm one of your favorite guests because I know there's so many people talking about this. That made me feel special. So thank you. I live in Kelowna and I've been a physio for about 16 years and I'm very passionate about women's health. It wasn't what I thought I would do, but I see such a huge gap in care for women in general. And I really focus in on the perinatal population. There's a few times in our life that we go through big changes, puberty, around the time of having babies, and menopause. And I would say I intervene in all of those stages, but I do find that there's a very captive audience right now for the pregnant and postpartum population. There's this hunger to learn. And with that comes a bunch of information, which I think is well-intentioned, but it creates a lot of fear and overwhelm. I really like to try to present information in a way that takes away fears. And so thanks for having me on.
Let's get into the meat of today's podcast.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I brought up with in some of the conversations I've had with you is that I do hear some of the messaging around, oh, don't see a physio till 6 weeks. There's this magical number of 6 weeks, and it's dangerous to see a physio before that is what I think a lot of people believe, and that you should not even consider seeing a physio until you've been discharged from your last appointment with your perinatal provider. And I always try to picture, what do people picture that we do? And I have this image of someone coming in with this megaphone saying, come on, right after someone has their baby and say, get up, jumping jacks, crunches, let's get going. I think sometimes that's what they visualize that we do. And so I really enjoy having this conversation today about what really we offer as physiotherapists in the first 6 weeks or leading up to. And you've mentioned how maybe preparation is important. I love to see people in pregnancy because, one, I think being proactive is very helpful, but we're talking about muscles that we never think about and are very automatic in nature. So the muscles that control our bodily functions and our core muscles are very reflexive muscles. So we're not used to thinking about them. So to all of a sudden have to think about rehabbing those muscles after can be a bit of a stretch for people. But I actually interviewed on my podcast not long ago someone by the name of Kimberly Johnson, who released research recently looking at the benefits of going into birth or the postpartum period with your eyes wide open, and that people that were receiving information about their pelvic floor and what may come after, not only were their outcomes better, but if they did have issues, they were dealing with them better mentally. And so I see that all the time clinically, but it was an amazing episode where she talked about her own experience and how she went on to do research to look at this, because we are seeing that going in with your eyes wide open helps you with the postpartum period.
And we see that not in the pelvic physio world, but in the kind of, that's why Sarah and I put together our online prenatal courses, and because we were seeing that people who actually came in prepared with a good sense of what could happen, understanding why things could happen, and what that postpartum period looks like for many, along with some of the scarier conversations, they came out of their birth experience so much more empowered and just feeling like they had information and they understood why things happen. Because I think a lot of the trauma that comes from birth experiences is either the poor communication with care providers, or people feeling like they don't understand what happened, or they weren't given a choice, or they weren't given proper consent. And so I agree, and that I'm really excited to hear your episode, having that information going into the experience and kind of having a good idea of what to expect, what is in the realm of quote unquote normal, and how can you help manage that is huge for people.
And I think I'm interested to hear your thoughts, but I think we struggle as care providers because you don't want to be the wah wah. You don't want to be, okay, I see you're excited for your pregnancy, and I don't want to be telling you about the could be's that happen, or I see that you already have some anxiety, so I don't want to add to that plate. I think that's hard for us as care providers because there's so many things that could or could not happen. But you hear all the time, why didn't anyone tell me? I do struggle with that. I don't want to, when someone says I'm being induced, I just often shut my lips and just kind of like, oh, these are some things that maybe you'll struggle with. I struggle with that. And I wonder if you have any suggestions. How do you approach that, given that you do know that people are better off, let's say, with going in prepared? How do you address that when you don't want to overload them with information?
I think it's n- allowing people to recognize that these are the common things that can happen. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but here's an opportunity to do some research around it so that you can be better informed, so you can go in having a little bit more information, so that if it does happen to you, you feel more comfortable in that situation. And for people with anxiety, often what helps them is more knowledge. Now, they
Mhm.
can go overboard for sure. And so having a provider that they can talk to about their concerns, answer questions, be specific in their area or location, geographical location, is really important. But I think for people, especially who have more anxiety, they want information. And so giving them good, high quality information rather than letting them go down the rabbit hole of the World
Mhm.
Wide Web, which has all kinds of crazy stuff and misinformation, which can set them up for failure. I think it is combating that anxiety and that stress with good, high quality information so people have a broad sense of what to expect. Now, like you said, everybody's different. Every birth is different. Every person is different. And so we never know how things are going to go, or what one person may be affected by if it's different than somebody else. But I think just having that good general sense of information and a trusted care provider that you can ask questions of is so important.
And that's what I think you probably see that from the course that you've created. I see it from the course that I've created, is that sometimes digesting that information at home, and you can watch it over and over, or you can watch it with your partner, because I think sometimes when we have a short amount of time, and I know your time is even more limited than mine, to spew all of that and them leave, and who knows what they took, and that's even more. So I do think that there's so much benefit to some of this online information so that you can digest it at your pace and watch it multiple times. And we're talking today about the early postpartum period, and this is, I think, again, one of the big benefits of digesting some of this information in pregnancy, because you have someone you trust, you know where to go after. And in these appointments, or these in the programming or anything where I'm sharing information, I don't want to go into, okay, and then A, if you have a C-section, do this. B, if you have a vaginal birth, do this, because we don't know what that's going to be. So I don't want to bombard you with all the details. Whereas if we have formed a relationship and if you have a place you can go, then it's almost easier to say, do you know what? Let's deal with things as they come. And you just know where to reach out. And I think that if I picture a lot of the new moms postpartum that are going home, whether it be after vaginal birth or C-section, or maybe they had their baby at home, but quite often, they're waiting for that appointment with you, like that follow-up appointment that they're gonna just something's gonna make them feel better. And you have certain things that you need to go through. And most often, I think it's geared towards the baby, breastfeeding, their mental health. And I know not the appointments aren't focused on the mom's physical body. I just know that's generally not what they're about. But I think that a lot of women are going to these appointments expecting that they're going to be given some information and they're not. So they're sitting at home for these 6 weeks just waiting to start their recovery. And so I think the benefit of working with someone or connecting with someone in pregnancy is who to go to,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So when
For
you
those
are
questions.
so when you're seeing people towards the end of their pregnancy, what kinds of things are you talking about for the postpartum period?
I always find that it's easiest. This is such a mysterious area of our body, and sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their heads around muscles and joints and everything in this private area of our body. So I always parallel another injury because everybody can picture that. And I say, if in the hospital you had a knee surgery, or maybe at home you had a really significant ankle sprain, one of the first things that I would suggest you do is rest, because that's what our tissues need at a cellular level, is to heal. And they want to be elevated. We put ice on things and we generally rest, right? And that's exactly what you would spend most of your day doing after a significant ankle sprain or after a knee surgery. You'd have your leg elevated. And I try to say, this is exactly why you hear rest postpartum, is you do need to rest, and spending time thinking that even though you have things to do, you have a body that's trying to recover. And so what kinds of things can you do in that early phase to pass off as much as you can? When someone offers to change the baby, take them up on it. When someone offers to get you something to eat, take them up on it and ask for those things, because that's exactly what you would do after your knee surgery. We just know that the family members know dad's going to be having his knee resting. We are going to all help him. We do that for other body parts. So help them understand what is rest. And because I think we spend a lot of time sitting and feeding our baby or cuddling with our baby. When you think about it, though, the area that's most, I'm going to use air quotes here so you can't see me, but injured after a birth is, gravity is not helping you when you're sitting on it. And so you have to sit a lot. I get that. But sometimes, like, maybe rest is more horizontal to help. If you're feeling heavy at the end of the day, or you're feeling a sore abdomen at the end of the day, maybe we need to help get gravity to help in a way that gets you more horizontal. Or just explaining, that's exactly, if you said to me, my ankle's more swollen at the end of the day, I'd say, are you elevating it enough? So I think picturing at the beginning, rest is very important. But in the case of a postpartum mom, rest is relative. And I think that's where sometimes you hear, as a physio too, in the hospital, I know that you have to spend most of your time with your knee elevated, but I also have to help you get home. And at home, you might have stairs you need to negotiate. Maybe you have small children. I'm trying to picture what you need to be able to, maybe you have to go back to work early. So I'm always picturing, what does your life need to look like so that I can help you relatively rest while you still get your needs met. And that's what I picture with a postpartum woman too, is that, okay, how long's your partner going to be home? What kinds of things can we navigate? Because to respect the healing process, you still need to be able to rest. And I think that's where rest comes in.
Yeah, and I just did a podcast with Dr. Pip from Making Mama Well, and we did one on baby showers, which was actually a really fun conversation. But part of it is like, how can you create one of the celebrations was for people who know they're going to need a little bit more support postpartum. Like, how do you create that celebration of your tribe who's going to be there to help you rest postpartum? And what can you implement in pregnancy to ensure that postpartum support and rest is available to you, right? And so starting to think about those things as you describe that rest to your clients, how can people start to prepare themselves for postpartum so that they can have that rest?
And I find that when I work with someone in pregnancy, and whether it be through the group sessions or the online self-paced or in person, what have you, usually I just say, make an appointment with me as soon as you're ready postpartum online, because there's too many barriers to a new mom coming into an appointment. And like you mentioned, I think there's a lot of fear around, does she know I have stitches in my private area? And I think there's a lot of association around vaginal exams with pelvic health physios. But I'll be honest with you, I don't feel I need to look at you or touch you at the beginning. I don't. I can just listen to what you say. And I love virtual appointments for the first one. And sometimes people make them within a week, sometimes 3 weeks. But I always say, I'm going to meet you where you're at. And so when they're pregnant, I love for them, I say, take a stab at when you think you might want it. Of course, we don't know exactly when your baby's going to come, but there's some flexibility in moving that. But I say, just make a stab as to when you think you'll want that. So you have yourself in your calendar. And then I promise you, we will see what's going on then. So just so they have a, okay, someone's going to be talking to me. And then I usually say, until that point, I want you to know that everything you're experiencing is normal. You're going to have a hard time controlling your pee. You might feel like you can't control your poop. You're going to have pain down there. It's going to be swollen. You're going to feel nervous. But that's all stuff that would happen after you had your leg injury too. You'd be swollen. You'd have pain. You feel like you can't move it. That is all normal. And that's why you need some rest. However, even if you just start thinking about very gentle breathing, and I often say, this stuff we've been working on in pregnancy where you just breathe and you feel soft, and then you exhale and you feel a little bit of contraction, just move within your limits of pain. Don't do anything that's not painful. And then when we talk, we'll see where you're at. That's what, just to give them something to be in their body, some just rest, and then let's see where you're at. Because I don't want to overwhelm them with, okay, then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do this.
Yeah, and I think we're going to bug you to do a little module for our prenatal class on maybe a video or something on that breathing, because I think it is such an amazing tool, having that kind of sense of that breathing and that canister and re-engaging all of those muscles that have been stretched out. You don't have to do hardcore exercises, but just
No.
the act of re-engaging can be so powerful and so helpful, kind of, and gives people something. I think people like something to do, right?
Is this pain I'm feeling in my pelvis normal? Should I do genetic testing for chromosomal differences in my baby? Is it safe to go to the dentist while I'm pregnant? Doctors and maternity specialists Sarah and Alicia are here to empower you with even more knowledge so you can have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience you can. Presenting the Pregnancy to Parenthood podcast, a new series of informative episodes geared week by week toward whatever trimester of pregnancy you're in. Tune in weekly, following along relevant topics as you move through pregnancy, or just binge listen and come back to the episodes you found most helpful. Access the full series for a full 2 years and listen to it on your own time. To learn more, go to www.shefoundhealth.ca or click the link below.
You'll hear all the time when you have the first appointment with these people, they're like, I feel dead down there. I can't feel it. But that's also why when we first show up as physios in the hospital after your knee injury, yes, we're seeing if you're resting, we're making sure you're elevating, but we're also getting you going right away. Very gentle knee movements and connecting with your muscles. The goal, not strength, but just coordinating those muscles again within comfort, because we also know the benefits of early mobility. And so that's why it's within comfort, but it really is no different than another injury.
And I think the other thing that people forget is that, yes, we call you pelvic physiotherapists, but you're actually physiotherapists for the whole person. And there's
Yes.
a lot of things that you can support people with that is just not the vagina
Yes.
vulva.
Yes.
We have people coming in with
Yes.
back pain because they're breastfeeding and they're contorting themselves to their baby. Or why don't you talk a little bit about some of the other things that you can support people with?
That's what I pictured, is if I'd go through a couple people that I've seen and just talk about how I approached it, and how physio's not just about Kegels. So one off the top of my head was someone 1 week post-vaginal birth, excruciating hemorrhoids. She said, hemorrhoids are absolutely ruling my life. And we talked about, I showed her with my pelvic model what the muscles around the anus look like. They're circular muscles, and they close the opening of your anus, and showed her that during your vaginal birth and you had an episiotomy, this is what happens to your muscles. And it's no wonder that the muscles that are around your anus are really sore and protective right now. And that's making it hard harder, it creates pressure inside, so it's harder to have a poop. So I was able to show her and explain to her why her pain is normal. We were able to talk about ways to feel more coordination with her pelvic floor muscles because she noticed, oh, the way I sit and nurse all the time, my anus muscles are clenched actually all the time, and my tailbone is tucked under all the time. I'm spending hours a day doing this. I wondered why nursing was so sore. So I've been trying to use all these different pillows, but nothing's helping. So I was able to show her different ways, positions to nurse from the lens of what are the anus muscles doing? Like, how can we take some of the tension off the anus muscles? We talked about ways to poop without creating as much anal tension because she was expecting pain. She was clenching her muscles. So I was talking about how I said, breathe out like you're breathing out birthday candles. And oh, I can feel that feels different. So just some strategies for pooping so it wasn't as painful. What things to bring up to her doctor when she went back to see her. Because again, I said, just make a list, make sure that you bring that up and see if there's something you can take to soften your stools, things like that. She also noticed that she had been wearing a compression. She said, you know what? Now that I think about it, I've been wearing this abdominal compression band that someone told me I should wear. And my hemorrhoid pain started when I started wearing that. Do you think the added compression might be dealing with more stress down on my pelvic floor? So we were able to talk about some of the things that she thought may have started it. And even though she was so scared to move and in so much pain, we talked about how the spine attaches to the tailbone, which attaches to the anus, and maybe just getting on the ground and doing some spinal mobility could help decrease tension in the whole area. And I think we're quick to think like, I shouldn't be doing anything. But why can't you move your spine after you've had a birth? And just like after the knee surgery, I would never say stop moving your arms. And so I think sometimes we don't really realize that sometimes getting the whole body moving can help with the actual symptoms. So that was one that I thought about. I didn't need to touch her anus. I didn't need to look at her episiotomy, just gave her some strategies. That was all. That was actually all through an email appointment. Another one, 3 weeks postpartum, just overall wanting to be proactive, feeling very overwhelmed just being a new mom. And so she said, like, you could tell her mental health was really, she really wanted to get out and do some walking. She really wanted to do some gentle stretching on the ground, but she was fearful of that because she was feeling some pressure down below, but she's having to sit on a ball and bounce her baby all day. And so we talked about the benefits of maybe getting horizontal a little bit more. If you have to rock your baby, you have to rock your baby. But I wonder if as soon as your partner comes home from work, you could pass your baby off, spend some time being horizontal. And how could we address the mental health stuff by getting you some activity that doesn't cause that pressure? Because I think the mental health is such a massive component, and that sometimes we say don't do anything or be careful, but sometimes these women need a bit of, like, even if it's just outside time for 5 minutes by herself.
I literally had that same conversation with somebody the other day, a week and a half post C-section. She's like, I just need to get outside for a walk. I was like, that's fine. Just even go sit outside or go walk, take 20 minutes to walk half a block back and forth. Just listen to your body and don't
Yes.
push it. Don't cause pain. But if that's what you need for your mental health, that's okay to do. And she just needed some permission to do that because don't do anything for 6 weeks. Don't lift anything heavy, baby,
Exactly.
which is good general advice, but sometimes we need to modify our advice on an individual basis.
And I see sometimes that those women will say, you know what, just the permission, and I always say, you don't need my permission, but I think sometimes we just need to say it's okay. Just try it. We give the permission to try it, I think sometimes. And she said, I noticed that since I heard I was normal, my pressure's better. Do you know what I mean? Is I think sometimes we put a magnifying glass on that pressure and we think something's wrong. I shouldn't doing something, but sometimes it's just getting out and getting your brain off of that pressure that helps the pressure. And so I think looking at the person, like you just talked about, as a big picture, they're not just an injured pelvic floor. This is a big picture, and maybe this person's mental health to be addressed. That's the biggest puzzle piece for this person right now. Yeah.
Totally. Awesome. And then people come in, we chatted about this in past podcast as well, as a lot of the work that pelvic physios do can actually be done virtually. And sometimes it's really helpful to see the positions in which people are sitting or feeding or
Yes.
sleeping to help them brainstorm around different options rather than coming in person and not seeing you, the provider, not seeing what their reality is. So I think a lot of
Mm.
stuff can be done virtually, which is an amazing gift that COVID gave us, one of the few. That kind of shift to virtual health makes it so much more accessible for people, especially in those first few weeks postpartum where it's a journey to get out. Sometimes it's nice to get out, but sometimes you just wish
Oh,
you could do it at home.
well, I think not only from like my line of work, not only does it make it more accessible, but it makes it less scary because I do think people think she's going to look and she's going to touch, and I'm not ready for that. So I think it gives this element of protection and yeah, trust, because you hit the nail on the head is that when you really ask these people, how are you doing? Oh man, I'm so scared of diastasis. But I notice when I get out of my bed with my baby or when I get out of the deep chair, I'm getting this tenting action. And so we can talk through, okay, what is diastasis and why are you normal to be feeling some of these things? And you know what? Go back, show me again how you're sitting up. Okay, now try this. Try doing it with an exhale. Try thinking about gently lifting your pelvic floor, and I can watch them and see their tummies and they can describe to me what they're feeling to find a strategy so that they can do their day-to-day stuff with more confidence, because otherwise they try to avoid everything because they're waiting for 6 weeks to get some guidance on their diastasis or what have you. So I agree. I love telehealth. And I think, especially even for the first 1 or 2 appointments before you feel comfortable going to see someone in person, it can be very valuable.
And I think it's okay to ask your providers what to expect. So a lot of people are scared of pelvic physio because of the concerns around vaginal exams and maybe histories of trauma or whatever it is. And it's okay to, when you call and book an appointment, say, I'm not super comfortable with a vaginal exam. Can this be done without one? And I bet you every single person will say yes. And that's the case with any care provider. If you're worried about something or you're scared about something, it's okay to be upfront about that, because if we know that, we can work around that to make you feel comfortable in whatever
Yeah.
way that we can provide care to you.
And that's, I think, a great point, because there's no two physios the same. Just like I always say, there's no two hairdressers the same. And sometimes that's the benefit of social media or looking around or asking your friends or asking on Facebook groups or what have you. But just finding someone that you feel comfortable working with, because some physios, I'll be honest with you, they do doing internal exams. That's how they feel they collect information the most, but maybe they're not the person for you. So I think that there's nothing wrong, like you said, phone the clinic and say, this is what I'm thinking. And I get those emails all the time from the clinic. They'll forward me an email from a client saying, what can I expect from you? And I love that they ask. Yeah, because you need to find the right fit.
Yeah. Knowledge is power. That's what we started off this podcast with. Awesome, Mel. Well, thank you. So today we chatted about preparation for birth and what to expect postpartum, both from a pelvic floor point of view with the amazing work that you do, and also from our kind of childbirth education piece, but how important that is, because it also helps normalize that process for people so they don't feel alone and they don't feel like they're the only one and they feel shy about asking questions. If you have a good sense of what to expect, you're going to know what's normal and what's really not normal, and therefore what to ask questions around. And we also chatted around that first 6 weeks postpartum. That does not mean that you cannot connect with a care provider that kind of can help answer questions and help guide you, especially in that physical recovery, and also the importance of rest and setting up your postpartum team so that you can actually get that rest when you're able to while caring for a new human being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. Mel, where can people find you if they want more information?
I have a podcast called the Pelvic Floor Project, and I have a website.
Awesome. And we will put all of those links on the show notes. If people want to find you that way, they can access it as well.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood, and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.